Before we get started with today's interview, just a quick reminder, click the thumbs up, make sure you subscribe and ding the bell so that you don't miss any of the great interviews that we have coming up. Now, on to today's interview. Welcome back, everybody. Today, I have a really special guest with me. Today, my guest is composer Wynn-Anne Rossi. Thank you so much for joining us today. I am delighted to have you here.
I'm glad to be here.
I would love to talk about your piece, Fresh Falling Leaves, which is very Debussy-esque.
Oh.
It's a wonderful composition with these beautiful cascading arpeggios that sound like leaves falling to the ground. Tell us a little bit about what inspired this and how you went about putting this composition together.
Well, you picked one of my favorites. Being from Minnesota and a beautiful, beautiful place to experience fall. This was a go-getter. You know, if I'm talking about daily comforts, fall is my favorite season. And we have this incredible maple tree in our backyard that is just glorious in the fall. It goes through many stages, and when the most fun is when the leaves start falling, because they're orange, they're red, some are yellow, but mostly orange, and they just flutter down from the sky, and the wind whips them around and takes them up and down, and oh my gosh, it's beautiful. So that's where it started, of course. So I made a list when I did the Daily Comforts books. I sat down and made a list of all the things that give me personal comfort and personal inspiration in daily life. And this was one of the first that was on the list. It started with that. And then, of course, you go to the feeling aspect. It's falling at the beginning of the piece. As I look at this, I mean, physically, just looking at the notes on the page, you can see the falling leaves. They're right there. And you can also see the swirls of the wind. One of my favorite things to do with students for improv is I do either snowflakes falling or I do leaves falling. And I have them make patterns come from the top of the piano all the way down. So this was already something that's very present in my studio, the idea of creating falling on the piano and creating those patterns and what happens when the wind pulls it up and creates an upwards pattern and then goes back down. So all of that is in this piece, all of it. And if you haven't noticed, I love my color harmonies. I love my major sevenths. I love my minor sevenths. I love my major and minor ninths. So it was a fun way to play around with those favorite harmonies. I always mix major and minor. I can't seem to stick with one or the other. I get bored if I stick with one or the other. So this is a good piece to analyze. It's a good piece to analyze because you're like, okay, then we've got an A minor seventh, then we got the D minor going on, and then we got, we got the A flat major seventh going on here, and then so it's a great piece to analyze from the standpoint of chords. But more importantly, it is just the floating of leaves that is inspirational and brings that certain beautiful nostalgic, a little bittersweet, that little feeling that comes with fall. Fall is always a little bit sad. It mixes that inspiration with that bittersweet nostalgia.
I love how in measure 9 and 10, it almost feels as though you're implying 3/4 time because we have these 3-beat ideas. You have a pair of 3-beat ideas followed by 2. I can see students wanting to almost place emphasis on beat 4 of measure 9 just because it feels like the start of the next idea. Do you see it as implied 3/4 time where we have these groupings of 3 and 3 and 4? Or do you see it more as taking that idea and exploring what happens to that idea when you've started it on a different metric place in the measure?
That is such a nerdy question to ask.
Thank you.
I say both.
Okay.
Because I probably, when I was creating, I was probably feeling 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. That's what I was feeling. But I think it's so fascinating that different performers hear and interpret things so differently. I never think I play my own pieces as well as the performers who take them seriously. because I take the composition process seriously. But when I'm done with a piece, I set it aside and I start the next one. I don't really approach my pieces as the performer might. I find it fascinating, the different emphasis, the different ways in which performers pull the piece to life. I think of myself as being the bones. I write the bones, and the performer resurrects them. The performer's going to resurrect these bones in a different way than I put those bones in. I'm going to like anything that is done with care. So emphasize that fourth beat if you want to and see what happens. And certainly experiment.
I love that. All right. Are there any things that you feel are challenges in this particular piece that a pianist who's approaching this work should really pay attention to and be mindful of?
I don't know if this will go over with the judges, but take liberties with the rubato, because wind is unpredictable, as are falling leaves. And so if you feel like it's moving faster or slower at this moment because of the wind, trust your instincts and play it differently every time you play it, because the winds are going to blow a little differently each time. I
love that invitation to be creative and for the performer to form a creative partnership with you, the composer. I think that's just awesome. Well, Wynn-Anne, thank you so much for taking time to talk with us today and share your wisdom and your insights and your knowledge. We're so incredibly grateful for you to be here today and give so freely of your time. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, Sam. And I hope we get to keep contact a little bit more.